Hello everybody, welcome. I'm Kate Baker and a big welcome from Devon for our third online event for Agile Rabbit, which is in partnership with the University of Exeter. So Agile Rabbit normally puts on events in Devon, but now with everyone, we're all online. And we explore ideas, global affairs, and the natural and scientific world. We like to think our events are for the curious minds. Do use the chat to say hello, introduce yourself, say where you're from, what you're drinking this evening, why you're interested in the topic. We've got quite a lot of events coming up being organised. So in June, we've got Lucy Doucette, the BBC's Chief International Correspondent, will be in conversation with the UN Relief Chief Mark Lowcock and David Miliband. They'll be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on poorer countries. It's likely to be on the 16th of June, but we're just confirming the date at the moment. So do keep an eye on our website. And then at the end of June, we're going to be going back in time to the medieval times when the Brits spoke French with Dr. Thomas Hinton. So most of our events are online and are available on the website, agile-rabbit.com. Now, if you enjoyed tonight and can afford to, then please do consider a donation to help us put more events on for curious minds. There'll be a PayPal link posted in the chat that you can follow. So without further ado, let's get on to this evening. So the format for this evening is what we've done for the past two events. It will be a talk for 20 minutes, followed by a discussion. So do use the chat to comment throughout the talk, share links, resources, love to hear from you. And then use the Q&A function to ask questions that you'd like our speaker to answer this evening. After the talk, during the discussion, I'll be asking some of the questions that were submitted in advance, but also things that are coming through in real time. If you guys are having any technical issues, I know these things can be a bit of a pain sometimes, don't panic, often just exit and come back in. You can re-enter as many times. And if there's anything persistent, then you can private message us. So in the chat, there's you can do a private message to Agile Rabbit and we'll see if we can help you. And just a heads up, the event is being recorded and we'll upload it onto YouTube. And we're also being streamed out, I think on YouTube, maybe on Facebook. So yeah. So let's get on with the tonight. And today's speaker is a senior lecturer at the University of Exeter and a National Geographic explorer. She is the leading expert on animal movements using state-of-the-art miniaturised electronic tracking units. It's the perfect time for this talk as we're seeing lots of birds returning to the UK for the summer. I don't know about you, but the bird songs have just, got me through this lockdown. Really enjoyed hearing them tweeting. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Dr. Lucy Hawkes. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate.
How are you doing? Where are you coming? Where are you streaming from?
I'm streaming from Dawlish, as I like to say to everybody, where the train line fell in the sea. Really put the place on the map.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's a nice place to lock down.
It is a lovely place. Yeah, we have the beach right on our doorstep, so it's easy to go for a lovely beach walk and, as you say, do some nice bird spotting, see the odd seal as well. So it's a lovely place to be locked down.
Oh, fantastic. Right, well, over to you. I shall hide myself. I'll see you in 20 minutes or so.
Cool, thank you so much. It's such an exciting thing to be doing this because it's so different as a speaker to kind of be using this really dramatically different format. It's been an interesting journey learning to speak to people online like this. It's not quite the same because I can't see your smiling faces at home. I can't see when you laugh at my terrible jokes or if you look bored if I'm going on about something too much. So it's kind of a weird format for us. But some of the advantages of being at home, of course, is that we can kind of relax a lot more. I'm not talking to you in my pajamas, although I did consider it, but I did get myself a gin. So I'm going to be drinking a gin throughout this, which is not something I would normally do in a talk, but I can do it today. So I'm going to show you my slides. So I've got about a 20-minute presentation for you, and then I'll take some questions at the end. So here we go. Okay, so my talk this evening is called Why Do Animals Migrate? I thought, first of all, I would just talk about what migration actually is. when I can get my slide to move. So migration is generally defined as a regular, usually seasonal movement of animals from one place to another, so to and from a given area. And when you think about animal migration, you tend to think about some of these kind of BBC wildlife documentary things. So you think about the incredible humpback whale, and these have been tracked making a migration of 8,461 kilometres in the course of a year. So you can see these whales here are crossing the entire Atlantic Ocean from the Caribbean over towards the Northeast Atlantic. And so this is kind of, stereotypical migration, spectacular movements of amazing wildlife over long distances. Great white sharks can make incredible migrations. One was directly tracked, travelling from the tip of South Africa to the west coast of Australia, making about 11,100 kilometre movements in just one direction. So it would have gone back the other way as well. So they can cover some incredible ground. Swig of gin. In case my gin looks cloudy to you, I made it myself. I went on one of those brewery tours in Plymouth and made my own gin. Delicious. Anyway. One of the longest distance migrations in the world, though, is actually undertaken by a bird. This is a bar-tailed godwit, and this bird makes a migration from breeding grounds in Alaska, which you can see in the inset map, down to New Zealand for the winter. And this bird covers 11,000 kilometres in just a week. And we can measure its flight speed. We get lots of locations en route from this bird. And we know from its travel speed that this bird is definitely not able to stop to eat, to drink, or to sleep or rest in any way throughout that entire migration. So 7 days, non-stop, endurance flight, 11,000 kilometres, pretty spectacular stuff. And these birds weigh about 500 grams, so kind of like a bag of sugar. By the time they arrive at their breeding grounds in New Zealand after this amazing journey, they weigh only about 250 grams. So they consume half their body mass making this spectacular journey. As amazing as this is, it isn't actually the longest distance migration of any animal. That's made instead by the Arctic tern, which you can see here. These live in the Arctic, as their name suggests, but they don't stay there in the winter, and instead they actually migrate all the way to Antarctica. So these birds are capable of traveling across the entire planet. And so in that map there, you can see in green and yellow, the northward and southward movements of a bunch of Arctic terns that were tracked with tags. So we think they cover something like 80,000 kilometres in the course of a year. These are long-lived birds. They can live for probably 30 years. So over the course of this bird's lifetime, it can clock up enough miles on the clock to make probably several round trips to the moon and back. It's really a spectacular animal. And these only weigh about 100 grams. I study these right now in Iceland. In fact, they're arriving there right now and starting to pick their nesting sites, and a bunch of them are carrying tags, as I'll tell you in just a second. These are furious birds, though. They swoop down from the sky and attack anybody stupid enough to go near their nests, which is typically us researchers. They have a heck of a personality. They're amazing animals. But the other thing I want to make clear is that migration is not just undertaken by the biggest of animals. It can also be undertaken by very small animals too. This is a weather radar picture. You're quite used to seeing these on the news in the evening. It can tell you, for example, that there are rain showers coming. Ground-based radars basically reflect radar energy into the sky, which will bounce off individual raindrops and come back down to tell you that there's rain up there. So if radar can bounce off a raindrop, it can sure as heck bounce off an insect. And what you can see here is the migrations of probably billions of locusts. This is over a city in the United States, over Albuquerque. But there are literally millions and millions of insects also making migrations in the skies above you. And I don't think we typically tend to think about that when we talk about animal migration, but it's incredibly important. A study last year showed that about 3.5 trillion insects, or up to about 500 million tons of insects, migrate over the southeast of the UK every single year. So there's this whole load of stuff right above your head, no matter where you are on the planet, going on, amazing migratory animals undertaking incredible feats. And not just on the land, but also in the seas as well. So in this picture here, you can see plankton. These are microscopic animals and plants that make up the very base of the food web in the oceans. And millions and trillions of these plankton make diel vertical migrations, coming up from depth and going back down to depth over the day and the night, tracking patterns of temperature, light, all sorts. So there's migration going on all around us, all of the time. It doesn't just encompass a whale traveling from A to B, it also encompasses all these other amazing kind of icky things that are going on too. But why do animals migrate at all? Well, first of all, because it's a really good idea. If you breed somewhere like this is Mongolia in the winter, it's pretty cold, it's pretty rubbish. Well, it's not rubbish, sorry. Mongolia is a brilliant place to be in the winter, but if you're an animal that needs to eat plants, it's rubbish. Everything's covered in snow, everything's frozen, you can't get to any food. So first of all, if the weather is inclement, then you pretty much want to move. And so if you can migrate, then you do so. As a consequence, you live better, you survive better, you breed more, you reproduce into the population better. You might also move to get away from predators. Generally speaking, there's a pattern where there are a higher biodiversity and abundance of predators close to the tropics than there are to the poles. So if you have the capacity to move towards the North or the South Pole, you should be able to get to somewhere that's got less predators. So if you're a ground nesting bird like an Arctic tern or a goose or even a raptor, it would make good sense to get as far north or south as you possibly can to reduce the chances that your lovely eggs and your really beautiful offspring don't just get eaten by a wolf or a fox or a badger or something like that. And then lastly, you would migrate to make use of seasonally changing resources. So in this map here, you can see chlorophyll concentration, and purples to blues are very low chlorophyll levels. And then as you get to yellows, oranges and red, the chlorophyll level goes up. And this map is static, but actually if I could animate this map for you, which I'm not going to attempt because we're trying to do a video thing and you could just imagine how it would go horribly wrong. But if I was to animate this map for you, you would see the planet breathing. You would see these chlorophyll layers kind of pulsing with the seasons. And every single year, you can kind of go to a slightly different part of the planet and get much better food. So as you go further north, as you can see in this map, the food is better, the chlorophyll concentration is higher. That means the plants are richer, so the animals that eat them are going to be better, and the animals that eat them are going to be better, and you're traveling to like the best buffet there possibly is. So the reason that animals migrate is because they can, and because it's a really good idea to do it if you possibly can. But how do we know all about animal migration? Well, this is where I guess I come in. This is what my area of specialism is. And what I want to convince you over the next couple of slides is that tracking animals is fun, interesting, and quite creative as well. So people started off tracking animals in some really rudimentary ways. So here you can see an American sea turtle biologist called Archie Carr, and he's tying helium balloons onto sea turtles. When they go back into the water, they've got a really long rope on the balloon. The turtle will travel around, but the balloon will hopefully just stay on the top of the water. Jacques Cousteau did this as well, actually. So this is a really simple way of being able to track where turtles go. And actually, they understood for the first time from doing this that these turtles stay quite close to the beach after they finish laying their eggs, which they lay up on the beach in the sand. They tend to hang around for a while longer. But there are kind of three families of tracking animals when it comes down to it. The first one is kind of inferential or forensic techniques. These are not normally devices you attach to an animal. Instead, it's information that's collected about where the animal might have been or information that suggests an animal was present. Have you ever caught your child with like chocolate spread or jam all over its face, but it denies that it's eaten any? That's forensics, as that is. You're basically going, you've definitely been eating some chocolate, and it's going, no, I haven't. But that's exactly what we're kind of taking that approach, looking at animals too. Then you've got archival animal tracking. This is usually a device that you put onto an animal of various different sorts, but normally they record huge quantities of data. And if you try to download a large film over the internet on a poor bandwidth, you'll probably find you either don't manage to download all of the file or your battery dies on your phone or your laptop before you manage it. Well, that's the same problem with animal tracking tags. So if you're going to collect loads and loads and loads of information, better to store it like you would on a USB stick than to try to send it over a long distance. So if your priority is loads of data at really high resolution, don't bother trying to send it, try and get the actual tag back. And then the last type of animal tracking is remote animal tracking. So this is, again, a device that you put onto an animal, but this one usually will transmit its data over long distances, sometimes up to a satellite. So you don't have to be anywhere near the animal, and you can be automatically collecting information about it every single day. So it transmits small amounts of data back remotely. You don't have to be there, and you never have to see the animal again, and you'll still get data to understand where it is, which is pretty cool. So different types of biologging are really only limited by imagination, and we already use tags that can record where animals go, but can also record things like the sounds that they experience. My partner works on leatherback sea turtles in Central Africa, and he's put tags on them that are listening out and have picked up the sound of humpback whales. So he's tracked a leatherback turtle that is tracking the sound of a humpback whale singing. We can do that. We can also track animals feeding. We can track how they accelerate, how they move around in 3 dimensions. That helps us to put together things like how much they move. So have you guys got watches that tell you if you've done your 10,000 steps a day, which I'm pitifully short of these days, but it's the same kind of thing. It tells us how much the animal's moving over the course of the day. We can measure their heart rate. We can measure something called electroencephalogram, that's brain waves, so we can work out if an animal is sleeping, if it's thinking really hard. We can measure light levels on board the animal. Lactate, that tells us about exercise. It's a metabolic byproduct that suggests an animal's been working really hard. We can actually measure that. We can measure oxygen levels in an animal's blood as it's traveling around, like away from us, which is pretty mind-blowing stuff. We can pick up things like defecation, pooing. We've recently been tracking leatherback turtles, and we actually have data showing them pooing. We didn't know how often sharks had a poo before now, so we know that now. We can measure things like glucose, some of those essential fuels you have in your body to fund movement. And then things like EMG, which is electromyogram. That's your muscle literally contracting. So I can tell when you're moving around, how much you're moving around, and how that movement travels throughout your body. So we can already do all of these sorts of things. So forensic tracking encompasses a range of different techniques. The ones that are probably the most commonly understood are things like genetics, but there's also a technique called, the simplest one is this fabulous study, which I think is one of the best examples of how some of the most elegant scientific experiments don't need to be expensive. This project wanted to understand where badgers go. So outside each badger set, badgers tend to live in these family groups, they put some bait. And it says here, the bait itself consists entirely of peanuts and plastic beads held together in a matrix of golden syrup, commercially available sucrose syrup used in the UK for culinary purposes. I've used it to make flapjack, delicious. The latrine survey. The latrine involved visiting as many latrines as possible. Badgers have particular areas they like to go to the toilet. They're actually quite clean animals in that respect. So they visited as many latrines as possible and recording poos of plastic beads. For the purposes of accurately identifying returns in the field, a reference board displaying samples of each bead was thought to be useful. So what they did is they went to one badger set with one family, and they gave them cookies with red plastic beads in. Then it went to the next set and they gave them cookies with blue plastic beads in, and the next one and gave them green plastic beads. And then by surveying all the latrines, they put together that amazing map you can see there. And that map, in the centre of each one of them, is the badger set, the home where they all live. And on the outside is all of the different poos they found that belong to that set. And what you can see there is like a carpet of tiles. These badgers are territorial, don't overlap really, they don't visit other badgers' sets, they stay pretty much put. It's kind of a little bit like gang warfare, they kind of have their distinct territories and they don't go anywhere else. But I love this study because it probably cost about £5 to do, and actually it was really elegantly able to show that these badgers don't overlap. And I think if you ask someone to design a study to do this, they'd be like, let's use GPS satellite tracking tags. Don't need to, you can spend £5 and do something amazing like this instead. I love this study. But a much more sophisticated type of forensic tracking is shown here. This is called stable isotope analysis. Common elements around us like hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, sulfur actually chemically vary ever so subtly. There are very slight differences in stable versions of isotopes. So this is basically a hydrogen that's got one extra neutron. Remember that a molecule is made up, or an atom is made up of a proton, a neutron, and an electron. If you have one extra neutron, it makes you an isotope. and you get those occurring in a reliable and predictable way. So on the left-hand side here, you can see these isotopes of hydrogen. And you can see that as you go north up into Canada and right up into the Arctic, you can see that these numbers are really strongly negative. And as you move down towards Mexico and Florida, you can see they get closer to zero. You are what you eat, so you are constantly assimilating isotopes from the environment around you. And so I can go out now and I could sample one of you listening today, and I could actually compare the sample of your tissue to these background maps of these different isotopes to try to understand where you've been. And so a tiny creature like this monarch butterfly here can actually be captured, have a little piece of its wing taken off, dried, put into a mass spectrometer and tested, and then we can work out where we think these butterflies have been. And so in this particular study, the map on the right-hand side is showing you that most of these butterflies came from probably sort of approximately the northern states of the United States, and they were recaptured down in Mexico. So that you weren't able to strap a tracking device to these butterflies, but we can still tell where they've been. Archival tracking tends to use a really broad range of tags. So here you can see loads of different animals, and you can see some different types of tags, and these measure loads and loads of very different things. I wanted to give you a couple of examples of what archival tracking can do. And as I said, this is generally tracking that collects huge amounts of data, but doesn't transmit it, stores it on board. You've got to find the animal or find the tag again to get the data back. This is a fantastic study. It was using something called IMASEN, intermandibular angle sensor. And so this penguin here is wearing something called a Hall sensor, and it's been put on its top beak here. And a Hall sensor can tell how close it is to a magnet. So a magnet has been put on the penguin's bottom beak, as you can see in the picture there. As the penguin opens its mouth, the magnetic field gets weaker. So you can actually work out when the penguin's mouth is open just by measuring the magnetic field coming off the magnet on the bottom beak. So what you can then do is you can then let your penguin go, and you can measure things like its diving behavior using something like something akin to a scuba diving watch. So here in this graph, you can see over about a minute of time, you can see this penguin has dived down to about 16 meters, trundling around. But what you can see in the top graph there is that it's opening its beak. So every now and again, it's opening its beak. And we think if it's opening its beak just a little bit, it might be that it's eating something small. And if it's opening its beak loads, it might be that it's eating something really big. So this was a really cool study that was able to say, okay, so the penguin goes down there, but what is it doing when it gets there? Is it feeding? You can answer it using this amazing technology. This is another cool study which was using a heart rate logger. So I have like a running watch that records my heart rate when I'm running. We can use something quite similar on animals too. And so this particular study, which was actually my postdocs and my job before I started at the University of Exeter, put these on bar-headed geese and measured them during their migration across the Tibetan Plateau. This is a species of goose that was thought to migrate over Mount Everest. They don't, they go around the side through the valleys because it turns out they're not as stupid as they look. But we measured their heart rate during the whole time. And you can see they have heart rates of 300 to nearly 500 beats a minute as they're making this amazing migration across the Tibetan Plateau, the roof of the world. And that enables us to work out how hard they're working. It also helps us to understand about weather patterns, because sometimes they might start gaining altitude while they're flying, but they're not working very hard to do it. Their heart rate's not very high. And that's probably because they're in a thermal or in some kind of wind that's pushing them up. So we can tell really cool stuff like that. And in this plot as well, you can see wing beat frequency. So how often are they beating their wings? Again, just like your 10,000 steps a day watch. But what amazes me about these birds is, look, they're beating their wings 4 times a second, every second, for the entire migration across the whole Tibetan Plateau. So these birds work really, really hard, which is really cool. But you can imagine there's so much data coming back from these birds. To transmit that data over a long distance is really hard. So instead we store it on board the logger, and then we catch the bird again and take the logger off. And then you get remote tracking. And remote tracking is probably the one that most people are familiar with. It's certainly the easiest, but it's also very much the most expensive. And that's because obviously transmitting data up to a satellite and receiving it from a satellite means that you're going to need to pay someone some seriously hefty subscription charges. So satellite tags typically cost anything from say $1,500 up to maybe $6,000 for a single transmitter to go on one animal. So they can be incredibly expensive things. But you never have to go back there again. You never have to catch your animal again. So you save yourself a lot of money that way. And these tags can work for years. So the longest I've ever been tracking an animal with a satellite tag was a sea turtle from the Dominican Republic that we tracked for nearly 4.5 years. So it's not bad value for money, actually. There's a huge range of different types of remote tracking tags now that you can buy. And so you can see just some of them here. Some of these record depth, some of these record GPS, some of these stay on the animal and then detach at the end and transmit all of their data in one go. Others transmit their data every time the animal comes to the surface or at predetermined periods. So these tags do a lot of different things, but you can see they're all different types of shapes, which depend on the animal you're putting them on. So they're generally custom made for us by just a handful of companies, and they make them the colour and the shape that we think is going to work best for our animals. In my Arctic Tern project that I mentioned earlier, we're using some of the smallest tracking tags in the world. So here you can see some GPS, some accelerometry or kind of like step count tags, as well as the one that's green just to the left of the EE, that's a light geolocation logger, and these are amongst the smallest tags that you can get for any animal. That's actually a relatively big one because I want a location every day for a year from that tag. You can get some that last much less time, that weigh well under a gram, so tiny little tracking tags. And we have to work out how to put these tracking tags, whether they're archival or remote, onto animals. So we can do things like use harnesses, we can use glue, we can bolt them onto animals. Sometimes if it's something like a tortoise that has a shell that's nice and thick and doesn't have nerve endings, you can actually bolt onto them. You can clamp them onto them. People would clamp tags onto shark's fins. It's really up to you to work out the best way that you can keep a tag on your animal. And it's hard. Sometimes it goes horribly wrong and you lose lots of tags, and it's a real issue. So you do what you can, really. But it's really fun trying to figure out the best way to attach your tag to your animal. And it's worth just mentioning here about ethics of animal tracking. It's hard. You want your animal to be healthy and well and behave as naturally as it possibly can. But equally, you are asking it to take a tag with it. You are burdening it with a device. So we always try to keep the tag as light as we can and keep the way that we attach the tag to the animal as nice as we possibly can. We need this data. Generally, these are conservation projects, so it's important data, but you want to be kind of careful about making sure your animal's as happy as it can possibly be. Drink some gin, sorry. No, ice cubes are melting. An example of two satellite tracking projects are here. This particular project is working on the basking shark, which is the second largest fish in the world. They're absolutely enormous. They can get up to 10 meters long. And we tag those by actually inserting a very small dart next to the dorsal fin. And as you can see in this photo, these sharks like to spend a lot of time near the surface, hence the name basking shark. They were thought to be basking in the sun. They're not. And so we put a dart in the back, then we have a piece of fishing line, and the tag sits on the end, and the tag can float up to the surface, and it can send location messages far better through air than it can through water. And so we attach the tag that way. And on the left-hand side here, you can see the movements of 4 different sharks. And these are very British sharks. They're tagged in Scotland. They love the waters of the wider British Isles. So you can see them making journeys around the whole of the island of Ireland, and remaining very much within the Celtic Sea as well. So these are really fascinating animals and live here in Scottish waters. And we didn't really know that for sure until we started using this satellite tracking technology. This is a cool study that used GPS collars on elephants to have a look and see how heritable elephant movements were. So what they found is that they tracked the same groups of elephants over multiple generations. So they would track the offspring of the elephants as well as the parents. And they found that in this map here, you can see the coloured squiggly lines of the movements of lots of different elephants. And over the course of generations, the elephant tracks gradually started to move north, probably because of interference, disturbance, and potentially poaching. So quite a powerful study. But why does tracking migratory animals matter? Hopefully you think it's cool. I think it's cool. I think it's fascinating. I love traveling to sometimes countries really different to Britain, and working with local people, living as local people do, catching mad animals that I normally would never really get to interact with, putting tags on them and finding out for the first time something unique about where they've been. That's great. But actually, what does it matter to society where animals go? Well, studying migration can help us. Understanding how these animals are able to make these amazing journeys actually reveals that animals have solved many of the biggest problems that we humans still have to face. But also migrating animals to a greater or lesser extent can threaten us, as we're all too aware. So, for example, one of the ways that studying migrating animals can help us is in the study of obesity. We're in the middle of an obesity epidemic. Obesity rates have never been so high. But migrating birds, for example, are seasonally morbidly obese. This is a great crested grebe, and you can see on the left-hand side here a medical scan of this grebe prior to migration, and that yellow is fat. So this is like a butterball with a bird stuck in the middle of it, and they have to be that fat to make the amazing migrations I was telling you about earlier. Grebes don't go as far as Arctic terns and bar-tailed godwits do, but they still make a fairly impressive migration. On the right-hand side, you can see this grebe arriving at the end of the migration, and you can see it's hardly got any fat left on it. So these birds have burnt their way through huge quantities of fat, but they're going to go and get massively fat again the next season prior to the migration. So these animals are seasonally obese, they lose the weight, but they don't seem to suffer any ill effects of it. How can we learn more about that to help humans in the obesity crisis? Birds also have a really peculiar thing about them, which is that they have enormously high blood glucose levels. Anybody out there listening who might be a diabetic, have a look at these plasma glucose levels on the left-hand side on the y-axis of this graph. These are in millimoles per litre. Generally in humans, if you have a kind of a resting plasma glucose level over about 11 millimoles per litre, you're considered to be a diabetic. It means you have a medical condition which needs managing to some element. In this plot, you can see mammals in black blobs and you can see birds in white blobs. And you can see that most mammals have blood glucose levels under that number, but birds are almost all over it. Birds have really high blood glucose. Whereas in humans, we get, sight loss, we have circulation issues, we have all sorts of things that are horribly wrong with us when we get diabetes. But these birds are essentially permanently diabetic and live long, healthy, athletic lives. So how do they do that? And how can we learn about that? And how can we apply that to humans to try and help the diabetes crisis, which is going along with the obesity crisis? Diabetes crisis, I'm so sorry. Of course, we also know that some animals are capable of carrying diseases which they are not affected by, but which pass into humans. And so I'm sure everybody is now more than ever aware of the fact that bats in particular are very good at carrying high levels of viruses and don't seem to suffer any ill effects. So the COVID-19 disease was thought to have originated in bats. It probably passed through an intermediary animal host, which I don't believe we yet know what it is. Pangolin has been mentioned at one point, but also pigs. But it almost certainly originated in bats. Bats, of course, can carry things like Marburg and SARS and Ebola, diseases that are deadly to humans, but these bats don't seem to suffer ill effects of it. We do understand a little bit about why that is, but how can we apply that to humans? How can we use that to develop interventions and therapies in future human medical uses? I don't know if anybody else has been insane enough to watch Contagion since the lockdown, but this is exactly where this all came from. So this is a fictitious film in 2011, but when you're watching it, you might think that, that you're watching a documentary from the last 3 months, but it starts with a bat. Top left, a digger goes into a forest, it fells some lovely pristine rainforest, the bats flee the forest, head into a warehouse which has got pigs in it. One of the pigs is taken for slaughter, prepared by a restaurant owner who interacts with poor Gwyneth Paltrow, who then blows a lucky kiss onto some dice and infects a bunch of people in a casino. And then Gwyneth Paltrow, who's normally a very beautiful woman, looking really not beautiful here. But this is where it comes from. Watching this I watched this about a month ago and just sat there going, I can't believe I'm doing this. But this is exactly where it comes from. This is not as far divorced from reality as perhaps it might have been. And one of the reasons that we think that bats in particular are probably one of these major disease vectors is because they are their species diversity tends to be concentrated in several key areas, one of which is Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asia in particular is undergoing this dramatic transformation right now, this huge economic revolution, massive amounts of building, massive amounts of infrastructure going up, pushing into wild areas that probably have bats in them with reservoirs of viruses that we've never been in before. This is really difficult. This is where you have to balance off human economic concerns against wildlife. And so a fantastic paper a couple of years ago was putting down the kind of where do we think emerging infectious diseases are likely to come from, and Southeast Asia turns out to be this massive risk area. But no continent on Earth is free from infectious disease outbreak. And you can see here in Europe, there's a big old circle over the top of us. So we're not immune of this. This is not a foreign problem being brought to our shores. It's just as likely to come from here as well. And the problem is that while migrating animals are traveling over the entire planet, we are too. So here you can see the movements of container ships, pleasure vessels, cruise ships traveling all over the world's oceans, and you can see there's not much ocean left really, apart from around Antarctica, that we're not in all the time. And the same is true of the skies. Here you can see a flight density map. So the hotter the line, the more planes are flying through the sky, and we fill the skies across the entire planet. So we're ever pushing into these wild, pristine areas, pushing out wildlife and therefore increasing the chances of infectious diseases. So migrating animals have the capacity to help us with some of the biggest problems we have, but also we need to be very careful because pushing into them too much can threaten us too. So with that, I'd like to wrap that up and take some questions. Hopefully we've got some questions. Prepare your gins, everybody.
That was fantastic. Thanks so much. I'm amazed at how your research can be applied in so many different ways.
I think because I've been able to study things like the bar-headed goose, which is just such an interesting bird because it goes to this Tibetan plateau and was thought to go over Everest. I ended up at a conference with a load of medics. And they were asking me questions about altitude, but then they were asking me questions about obesity and diabetes. And I was saying, well, do you know animals have solved these problems? And they were like, what? And it was cool being able to go, no, the animals have the answers to these questions, but we just don't know how to translate them across yet.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Proper transdisciplinary research. That's really cool. So we've got lots of questions that have come in. So I'm just going to get going. The first sort of links on to what you're saying about how people can impact migration. So there's been a lot of people asking the same question actually. This one particular one's from Susanna Cass. So how is climate change affecting migration patterns of UK species?
Yeah, fantastic question. And it is, there are several studies that are able to show this. One of the things that's really good for it is bird ringing. So huge numbers of people put rings on birds' legs that are unique and tell us which individual they are. And there are people who go out, there's a guy just down about 2 kilometres that way who goes every single day looking for bird rings. And we can tell when animals are turning up, and they're turning up earlier and earlier every year. But we can also see from tracking data too that animals are pushing further and further north. The really big problem is when you get mismatch. So an animal so if you're a bar-tailed godwit, right, and you migrate from Alaska to New Zealand, you're hoping that when you get to New Zealand, the weather's going to be fine for you to get there, and the food's going to be there, and it's, you're going to get there, you're knackered, but it's okay because you can have a nice rest and have a nice snack. But actually, if climate change has meant that the fundamental food web has changed, you arrive late to the buffet, the food isn't so good anymore, the quality's not so good, and it's hard for you to get over the effects of the migration you've been on. So it's a real problem. And predicting what's going to be, 1,000 kilometres away is a massive issue for migrating species. And so far, the evidence looks like they're not very good at predicting it.
Yeah. And is there anything as individuals that we can do to help migrating birds? This question is from Sarah Mercer.
But yeah, fantastic question. I think it's really about making sure that we have protected areas for animals, really. One of the cool things that's been done in protected area science lately is to understand that you don't just have to draw a fence around an area and go, no one's allowed to go in here ever again. You can have dynamic protected areas where you go, okay, this is only being used in like November to February, and then the birds are all gone, so we can open it back up again to humans. So protected areas are becoming a much more palatable thing, but they really are probably our only tool, actually. So that's a case of, this is where it gets really difficult, because we have to do something about the environment. We have to do something about climate change. And the only way to do that is to start making huge political changes that many of our political parties probably aren't likely to make. So you as an individual, the biggest thing you can do is to vote in a way that will protect the environment better. And that's a really difficult thing to persuade anybody to do. It's hard, isn't it? And
yeah.
I'm just
Yeah, totally. I've actually got a question here from my dad. So from Nigel Baker. So he's a big bird fan. And he's been logging the swallow arrival dates for the past decades. And they arrive in May within plus or minus 3 days. And he's saying no matter the weather. Is this usual?
Yes, and so that is really strong evidence to suggest that those birds are queuing in on day length changes. So one thing that's amazing, there's so many amazing things about birds, and I should say I'm not a bird spotter actually. If you spot a tiny colourful passerine songbird and you go, oh, what's that, Lucy? I'm unlikely to know. But I love birds because they're just spectacular. When birds go to migrate, like I was explaining earlier, they do no preparation whatsoever. So imagine you go, I might take part in the Olympics in a month. And then the day length changes. And because of the day length, you get this hormonal change, and that does happen in humans. But in birds, that causes a massive cascade of hormones to affect muscle growth. And they basically just get hench. So prior to migration, birds get these huge breast muscles. Their legs go, and they get these teeny little legs, and they're ready to go. But when a bird arrives precisely in time like that, it tells you that it's being strongly directed by light and much less so by the environmental conditions around it, which is amazing, right? Because can you imagine trying to work out the same day every year as a human without a calendar to help you? Can do it.
Yeah, no way. And just following on the theme of bird migration to the UK, we've got a question here from Victoria Benz. Do swallows migrate back to the UK altogether, or do they come like a few at a time?
I don't actually know, and one of the problems is that swallows are so small that they're very difficult to track. So there are some species of birds where we've tracked mated pairs or family groups, and we tend to know about that. The only way we would know about that with swallows would really probably be through leg rings, and I don't know is the answer to that. So yeah. Ooh, one to Google.
One to Google, exactly.
Yes.
And then we've got a question from David Rudman about the sort of definition of migration. So does migration imply a repeated journey? And then he goes on to say, if humans chose to go into space, would this be a very long migration?
Ooh, that's a great question. Yes, migration has definitely been applied to describe a repeated journey, even outside of the course of a season. So you traveling to work could be a migration, for example. So again, it's a human definition. So the definition evolves. It depends how you use it, and you can use it in any context you want to, really, as long as you kind of define it first. And I guess, yeah, if humans, well, soon we're supposed to be going to the moon, right? I think in 4 years' time we're due to go to the moon. That would certainly be a migration, I would say. There are animals who make migrations just once in their lifetime, or make even half of a migration in a lifetime. So I'm thinking about spawning salmon, or I'm thinking about things like dragonflies that can cross ocean basins, breed and die, and then their offspring continue the migration. So you don't even have to make the entire round trip yourself to count it as migration.
Yeah. And this is a question from Joel Island. So why do some bird species migrate at night when others migrate during daylight?
That's a great question, and we don't really know the answer to that. We think with some species, like the bar-headed goose migrates largely at night, and we think that might be because nighttime is generally colder. And so in their case, it's a good thing because colder air is denser, and at altitude, one of the major problems is a lack of oxygen. The denser the air, the more molecules it contains in a unit of volume. So actually it will have proportionally more oxygen in it if you travel, or proportionally more molecules of oxygen if you travel at night than if you travel during the day. Other birds might travel during the night to avoid predators as well. So if you're likely to be hit particularly by raptors, like eagles and stuff preying on you, then you might travel at night to stand a better chance. Some animals, of course, will migrate over several days, so they travel day and night. So I think there's a big mixture depending on the specific ecology of the species in question, really. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And so we're thinking about holding an event on rewilding, and myself and John were discussing earlier whether rewilding has an impact on migration.
Yeah, it probably does actually, and I would imagine it would be overwhelmingly positive. Anytime you can provide animals with space where they can rest, refuel, has got to be a good thing. And of course, you're not just providing benefits for the particular animal that's migrating, but also the ecosystem it depends on. So, for example, if you've got a bird that loves to eat big juicy insects, and you rewild an area that's got a pond, you're going to have a bunch more insects available that are going to be around for the bird to eat. So it's definitely a really good thing, definitely a tool.
Yeah. And then we've got a question about insects from Laura Grice. So how do insects of different generations know where to migrate? I think that's a great question, because how do they know?
I know, it's mad, because obviously they can't learn anything because their parents' generation is dead. But the really mind-bending thing is that if you're a dragonfly, so if you're a dragonfly, you migrate. You can migrate. Oh, hang on, I've got a map. This is why I have a map. You migrate to the ocean here. I'm doing the weather now.
Yeah, fantastic.
Across the Indian Ocean here, you die. Your offspring are born, and they've got to go back that way. So you can't even do what your parents did, because if you do what your parents did, then you won't survive. You're going to go the wrong way. So you actually have to encode in your genetic material to skip a generation in terms of the instruction that you follow, assuming that it is a genetic code. And we think it probably is genetic, because we've done things like transplant experiments, moving animals around and saying, if you're really from the west coast of Florida, then if I release you on the east coast, you shouldn't know to swim offshore, for example, as a lobster or a turtle or something, and that does generally work. But it's a case of genetic encoding and specific factors turning on different bits of the DNA. It's mind-blowing. The first time I ever went to go and visit National Geographic, I got horribly lost and was like half an hour late for the meeting, and I thought, a lobster could do this and I can't.
Some perspective. So we've got quite a few students who've joined us, and we've got this one from Ravi Roy. So I'm graduating this year and wanting to get into the conservation sector. What top tips do you have for me?
Oh, that's an awesome question. My top tip, head and shoulders above anything else, is do something, get out there, be brave. Whatever you do, just do something, right? So when I started my career, I went to go and work in North Carolina on sea turtles. I didn't know anybody in the US. I didn't know anything about sea turtles. It was scary. And had I had a bit less gumption, my family were very good at throwing me at stuff. My parents used to send me and my sister on mad courses to do all sorts of stuff, and I think it made me a bit brave, and so I just did it, because you can always run away, and actually one thing led to another. And I heard this fantastic quote last year where somebody said, luck is where preparation meets opportunity, and I think that's so true. I've been lucky to get to work on the amazing projects that I have, but I was prepared and I was there. So I was there when the opportunity came up. You have to be there, and you have to be plucky, a bit brave. You might learn that you never want to work with lions and you hate it. You might learn that you dislike being in a boat entirely, but hey, at least you know that about yourself. So get out there, do something, anything, and have fun too, because there's so much cool stuff out there to do. There really is.
Yeah, that's a really positive message, especially during these times. It's such a difficult time to feel confident and go off and do stuff, but you're so right, you just got to give things a whirl. Yeah. And there've been some other questions about it's clear you've done lots of field work in all different parts of the world. Have you got any field work fails or funny tales that you could tell us?
Yeah, definitely. Quite a few. So two of the most interesting stories that have happened have been in the last year. One is that last year our Arctic terns that we tagged in Iceland, they nest in exactly the same place every single year. So you put the tag on the bird, you come back the next year, you go to the same tussock of grass, and your bird will be nesting there. So we go back last year, and there just weren't very many nests, and there was just this one particular patch where we tagged loads of birds, and there was just nothing there. And we don't tag every single bird, so there's some that don't have tags on. And they weren't there either. And we were like, what's all this about? Icelandic people are perfectly legally allowed to and like to eat seabird eggs. And basically a 13-year-old girl got in the colony and ate half our research. So that's one. And then we've also had a fascinating tag, which we put on a bluefin tuna. And what happens is the tag measures light, depth, and temperature. And light helps us to work out where the animal is, because you get a change in day length with latitude and a change in sunrise with local time. So you can work out where the animal is. And it measures the water temperature on the outside of the fish and diving. And the tag is on the tuna, and all of a sudden it jumps up to about 37 degrees Celsius. And this is like around the UK and the Med. There's nowhere that warm. It goes dark, but we can see that it's still going up and down in the water column. And what we now think the only explanation can be is that an orca, a killer whale, ate our fish.
No.
It's the only reason it goes 37 degrees Celsius is a mammal body temperature, right? So it's got to be a mammal, and it's dark, so it's in it, going up and down in the water column. So I've had my research eaten twice, people.
Wow.
Okay, my homework.
Keep tracking it though. Once it was in.
And it went all the way up the French coast, and then it threw the tag out, and then it washed up on a beach in France. And a lovely French lady called Brigitte found it, and I got my mum to call her because she speaks French, and was like, "Oui, est une Belize or something, dogs and orc," and it's trying to explain it's been in an orc, and I was going, "Are you sure about this?" And we're like, yeah, tell the lady.
That's fantastic.
So that was a bit of a problem.
And you were saying about these sensors that there are companies that make them. So you're saying that there are companies that are specialised just to make tracking devices for animals?
Yes, there are, and there's not many. There's about 5 or 6 in the whole world, really. And one of the really big problems we have actually is that the market opportunity is quite small. So you might think a satellite tag costing $6,000 is insanely expensive, but actually if I'm a project and I buy 10, I'm probably not going to buy another 10 for a few years. So your company gets $60,000. Well, by the time you've actually developed the tag, tested it, pressure proofed it, gone through several iterations, and you paid your engineers time, you probably already lost money, and there's not that many of us doing it. So actually, to get these tags to be teeny tiny and work really well, we need some huge company. We need Google, or we need someone like that to step in, Apple to step in and put $1 billion into animal tracking. And actually, it would be worth it because of what's happening to the planet right now. Wildlife is key to our future. Understanding wildlife is key to solving our problems, and it's also a huge threat to us. Preparing this talk, I was thinking about trying to look at military budgets and look at military spending versus the cost to our economy of this zoonotic disease. And actually, it's simple. We have lost far more money already than we spent on our military budgets. We should be spending more money on wildlife.
Yeah, totally. And it has such a big impact as well, even sort of in a selfish reason for mental health, being outside, getting through this lockdown, going to sort of green spaces has really helped. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, there's, like I said, especially, the insects is a really creepy example, but there's stuff all around you all the time, and see if you can identify one particular species of bird and try and spot it as frequently as you can, and you'll notice when it disappears. So here down in Dawlish, we have oyster catchers, and when I take the train into work into Exeter, back in prehistoric times when we used to do things like that, I'd see these oyster catchers from the train, and then all of a sudden they're not there anymore. Like come February, they go, and then you suddenly start thinking, oh yeah, they've gone now, and then they'll come back again sort of late into September. And I never used to notice that until I studied oyster catchers, and then I was like, hey, they're back, and it's all around you. There's these cool animal athletes all around you, no matter who you are. You just have to look for them. Yeah,
it's tuning in, isn't it? And once you've seen something, then you really notice it. So I've got a sort of a Southwest local question from Amanda Barton, and she's asking if you're involved with the long-term tracking of the Dartmoor cuckoos.
I'm not, but I have examined one of the students that's studying it, actually. But no, I'm not involved in that project, but it's a very, very cool project. There's been some amazing long-distance movements by these cuckoos.
From where? I've got no idea where cuckoos go.
They can travel all the way down into Africa, but a bit like we were saying earlier about like genetic programming to make a migration, cuckoos are born in the nests of another species, right? So they have no way of learning anything from their parents. So when they're born, they have to be entirely precocial because they'll probably never ever see their parents at all. So yeah, there's some really cool stuff going on in that project.
Wow, fantastic. Well, that's all we've really got time for today. But thanks so much, Lucy. That was just absolutely fascinating, you know, to learn about the migration, but how you do it and the importance of it. So thank you. So for everyone who's tuned in, thanks for joining us. Do head to Agile-Rabbit to register on our mailing list and keep up to date with the events that are coming through. And we'll be getting this recording up online in the next couple of days, so you'll be able to share it. So thanks so much. See you guys later. Cheers. Bye bye.